We're used to thinking of Thor's hammer as a myth, a symbol of a god, an element of legend. But what if Mjolnir was a real device? One of our viewers sent in a story which suggests that Thor's hammer did not violate the laws of physics, but rather operated on a principle that science cannot explain.
In this science fiction podcast, you will learn how the hammer actually functioned, why only a select few could lift it, and to whom it truly belonged.
It is obvious that the owner of this weapon was not an ordinary person.
Start with the name that has echoed through 1,000 years of history. Mjolnir, the legendary hammer of Thor. According to the myth everyone knows, this weapon was so powerful that only the worthy could lift it. It had this almost magical ability to return to your hand like a deadly boomerang, the ultimate mythological artifact.
It absolutely is. I mean, it's a globally recognized piece of iconography. But for this deep dive, we were sent some source material that, well, it argues that the myth is a fundamental misinterpretation. We're looking at a visionary account, incredibly specific, quasi-historical, and almost technical, a breakdown of the reality behind the Norse legend. The claim here is that Mjolnir wasn't about magic or worthiness at all. It was about highly specialized, non-terrestrial technology.
And that's our mission today. We are moving past the storybook magic and diving straight into the technical specs, the actual warriors who wielded this terrifying artifact, a millennium ago? We're going to unpack the science and the scale of this ancient power.
What's remarkable is the level of detail we've been given. We have claimed heights for the users, the specific design of the weapon, its material, and the operational requirements. If these sources are accurate, this wasn't mythology. This was tactical deployment.
Okay, let's unpack this right away, starting with the wielders, the warriors themselves, because they're the first clue that we are not dealing with ordinary history. The source paints this picture of the warrior, and he wasn't just a big Viking, he was utterly massive.
The physical description is startlingly specific. It certainly fits the general aesthetic of a Viking warrior. Long, light, wavy hair, armor. But the scale is what immediately forces you to completely recontextualize everything.
Okay, so just how massive are we talking?
The claim is that he was approximately 2.5 times the size of a regular man. To give you a clear visual, the warrior stood at about 4 meters tall.
4 meters?
That is roughly 13 feet. Imagine that. That's taller than a standard utility pole, almost as high as a double-decker bus.
13 feet? Wow. If the average Viking was maybe, 5'7"? This is a biological anomaly of epic proportions. It instantly explains why these figures were mythologized as giants.
It does. And according to the source, they were active during a very specific time period, around 900 to 1,000 years ago, placing them squarely in the later Viking Age. Their immense size basically dictated their strategic role. They were the absolute vanguard, the ultimate shock troops.
Logistically, that's incredible. How did they integrate into a typical army?
They didn't really integrate. They led. The source notes that these massive individuals, and there were usually only a few of them, would always march far ahead of the battle lines. Ordinary, regular-sized people followed behind them, using them as a massive, armored, mobile shield.
You can just imagine the psychological impact. They're an insurmountable object. But this raises a huge question. Why were these massive people necessary to lead the charge? I mean, if the average soldier could carry a sword, what terrifying, impossibly heavy tool were these giants wielding that let them operate so far ahead of everyone else?
That terrifying tool is the subject of the next big revelation. Because this is where we have to dispel the hammer myth completely. The source clarifies, unequivocally, the weapon was not shaped like the simple blocky hammer Mjolnir. It resembled an axe.
An axe. So we need to shift our mental image from a smithing tool to something far more complex. Let's call it Thor's axe, like the listener suggested. What did it look like?
It was a fascinating design. The source describes it as looking like 2 axes joined together by a single handle. So picture a weapon head with a sharp cutting edge on one side and a flat hammer-like surface on the reverse for blunt force. Now, mirror that exact configuration on the opposite side. It had 2 heads and 4 potential contact points. Devastatingly effective from any angle.
That sounds incredibly cumbersome and dense. Which brings us back to the size of these warriors. We mentioned the myth required worthiness or magic to lift Mjolnir. If this was a technological artifact, what did the source say about lifting this double axe?
And this is key to decoding that whole myth of worthiness. The source states there was no energy field, no magic spell. The ability to wield it was purely physical. Only those incredibly large 4-meter-tall warriors had the strength to lift it. A person of ordinary size, the source says, simply wouldn't have held it, wouldn't have lifted it.
So the giant size wasn't just useful, it was the fundamental operational requirement. The myth of worthiness was just the ancient world's way of explaining a physical impossibility for a normal human.
Exactly. Completely demystifies it. But raw strength was only the first step. The operational requirement depended on that strength, but also on highly specialized technical knowledge. The user had to know exactly how to throw it, the perfect angle, the right force to ensure it came back.
Okay, so the strength problem is solved by the 13-foot giant. But that perfect boomerang feature, that's the other half of the Mjolnir legend, and it's the real technological marvel here, isn't it? What unique, non-terrestrial property allowed this massive weapon to fly back to its owner, and what happened if the warrior failed to execute that perfect throw?
The source confirms the myth. The weapon worked like a perfect boomerang, returning like a magnet to the thrower, which suggests some kind of innate, powerful attraction field, maybe tuned to the warrior's armor or even their biology.
That is terrifyingly effective, a ranged weapon that never needs reloading.
But the risk, as the source notes, was astronomical. If the user lacked that perfect skill, or if they failed to catch it on its return, the axe would just keep going. It wouldn't stop or slow down. It would fly into their own people following behind, causing truly massive friendly casualties.
That's a fascinating constraint, so dominant. It eliminates external enemies, but it creates zero tolerance for internal error. If the risk was that high, wouldn't they have just preferred a weapon that didn't come back? It suggests the return mechanism was absolutely essential to how they used it.
That's a great question, and it brings us to the core lethality of the weapon. We know it was heavy, it delivered a devastating kinetic blow, but the source gives us the key revelation about the material. The axe was made of a non-terrestrial material.
Non-terrestrial. Okay, so that suggests metallurgy that just didn't exist in the 10th century, maybe impossible density or unique electromagnetic properties for that magnet effect.
And this is where the myth of Thor's power truly merges with this technical account. When thrown, the artifact didn't just deliver kinetic force, it was described as emitting sparks and an intense energy discharge. Reddish electrical lightning or bolts, which, well, that explains the mythological association with thunder and lightning perfectly.
So it killed people with its physical blow and with a massive energy discharge that extended in a large radius around it. It's like a localized EMP combined with the spinning, razor-sharp object.
Exactly. Dual destruction capability. The source paints a gruesome picture of its scope. A single successful throw could destroy trees, structures, and wipe out, and I'm quoting here, not 100 people.
Not 100. That phrasing is chilling. It implies it could take out hundreds of ordinary-sized individuals with a single pass. It's early strategic ordnance. A single throw could instantly change the outcome of any ancient battle. But that begs the question. If these weapons were so dominant, how did their conflict ever end? What happened to these unparalleled instruments of war?
That raises a really important question about strategic dominance, doesn't it? If victory was guaranteed, why would anyone keep fighting? The source suggests the strategic implication was absolute deterrence. The side with the axes always won, and because the result was so clear, eventually nobody dared to attack them.
So they achieved a kind of technological peace by making aggression suicidal. They stopped using the weapons because there was no one left to fight.
Precisely. They entered a period of, well, armed absolute dominance, but they didn't destroy them, and they didn't just vanish. The source makes the incredible claim that these non-terrestrial axes, they're still here, on Earth.
Come in, boss.
Hidden and buried, intentionally, very deep underground.
That is astounding. These weapons that could wipe out armies are still down there, full of energy. Somewhere in what we now call Scandinavia, I would assume, given the roots of the myth.
There is a vague geographical clue given, highly technical and secretive. The location is described as being near the base of specific mountains. It suggests they were deliberately interred at strategic locations, maybe related to their energy source or where they were first found.
The idea of burying weapons of this magnitude suggests a deep responsibility or maybe a fear of what might happen if they were ever misused again.
Or perhaps they were put away not just for security, but because they had another function. And the final secret here is maybe the most modern part of this whole deep dive. These axes are not merely historical relics. They're not drained of power.
Tell me more about that latent energy.
The source specifically claims they're still full of energy. In fact, the listener's account suggests a truly shocking modern application. These artifacts could be used today as an anchor.
An anchor? When you say anchor, are we talking about something stabilizing an energy field or something that generates power itself?
The source implies the latter. that they function like a continuous, limitless electrical power station. They are essentially immense batteries or generators made from non-terrestrial material, just lying dormant. The myth of lightning wasn't just about the weapon's discharge. It was about its inherent nature as an energy source.
That puts a whole new spin on unearthing history. Imagine solving a clean energy crisis by finding a 13-foot giant's weapon and plugging it into the national grid. It really feels like we've jumped the gap between a campfire story and a sci-fi documentary.
It forces us to reconsider what we think of as ancient history and how much highly advanced anomalous technology might have been at play that we now just dismiss as myth.
So what does this all mean for you, the listener? We've taken Mjolnir, a classic piece of mythology, and given it this entirely new, deeply technical sci-fi backstory. The details include 4-meter warriors, a double axe design, a magnetic boomerang effect that demands extreme skill, and a non-terrestrial material providing electrical hundreds killing power.
It's a compelling narrative. A reminder that sometimes the most enduring myths are just garbled accounts of events that were technologically inexplicable to the people who saw them. The giant wasn't a god. He was just the only one physically capable of operating the machine.
And we are left with this final provocative thought for you to consider. If these relics are buried deep underground and still contain enough latent energy to function as a limitless power source today, what are the full implications of disturbing them? Beyond just solving energy crises, could they still be volatile? And what other forgotten non-terrestrial artifacts might be similarly dormant beneath the surface of the Earth, quietly waiting to be reawakened? A truly deep dive demands that we keep searching for the anchors of history.